War of the Worlds. The War of the Worlds.
Hello everybody, welcome back to the Old English Podcast with me, Mr. Dawson. Here we go with, what book's this again? Is it Frankenstein? Oh no, it's War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells, one of my absolute favourites. So sit back, make yourselves comfortable, and let's get down to business.
14. In London. My younger brother was in London when the Martians fell at Woking. He was a medical student, working for an imminent examination, and he heard nothing of the arrival until Saturday morning. The morning papers on Saturday contained, in addition to lengthy special articles on the planet Mars, on life in the planets and so forth, a brief and vaguely worded telegram, all the more striking for its brevity.
All right, here we go then. So this is another character here, the younger brother here in London, and he's another perspective from which the story can be told. So we've got another character. We've met the artilleryman, we've met the curate, and now we're going to meet the younger brother. It's all a way in which H.G. Wells can deliver his story through a different perspective, a different character. And you'll notice later on, the story is told from the perspective of the brother, and that's a really important narrative device. But for now, this is seeding the idea of having another character to tell the story. Now, this younger brother, he is a medical student, so he's a man of science, just as, in a way, the narrator is. These are rational thinking, scientific men. These are men who we can trust.
The Martians, alarmed by the approach of a crowd, had killed a number of people with a quick-firing gun, so the story ran. The telegram concluded with the words, "Formidable as they seem to be, the Martians have not moved from the pit into which they have fallen, and indeed seem incapable of doing so. Probably this is due to the relative strength of the Earth's gravitational energy." On that last text, the lead writers expanded very comfortingly.
But of course they're wrong, aren't they? Because the Martians have got out the pit. They're in there, they're in the machines, they're fighting against humanity, they're using the heat ray and blasting everything in sight. So actually the telegram is absolutely wrong. The news is wrong, and this is H.G. Wells making fun of the news and the slow way in which news can be disseminated through telegram and through newspapers. So this is an example of dramatic irony. And that's a structural technique. It's dramatic irony because we as the reader know much more than these people in London who are reading about these creatures who can't get out of the pit. We know, of course, that they can, which makes more dramatic tension.
Of course, all the students in the crammer's biology class to which my brother went that day were intensely interested. But there were no signs of any unusual excitement in the streets. The afternoon papers puffed scraps of news under big headlines. They had nothing to tell beyond the movements of troops about the common and the burning of pine woods between Woking and Weybridge until 8. Then the St. James Gazette, in an extra special edition, announced the bare fact of the interruption of telegraphic communication. This was thought to be due to the falling of burning pine trees across the line. Nothing more of the fighting was known that night, the night of my drive to Leatherhead and back.
So here we've got a little bit of satire. This is H.G. Wells really making fun of the slow way in which news is delivered through telegram, through newspapers, and it's a really quite satirical point about the late 1800s and the way in which, compared to the Martians, we as humanity was so backward and so struggling to actually get news out, even just in the neighbouring districts and boroughs of southwest London.
My brother felt no anxiety about us, as he knew from the description in the papers that the cylinder was a good 2 miles from my house.
2 miles? God blimey, Governor, 2 miles is nothing, is it? We know the monsters, the creatures, the Martians are out of the pit. This is dramatic irony at its very best. We know more than the brother does because we've seen these Martians climbing their slithery, slimy way out of the pit and into their fighter machines and destroying whole artillery barracks of those 12-pounder guns.
He made up his mind to run down that night to me, in order, as he says, to see the things before they were killed. He dispatched the telegram, which never reached me, about 4 o'clock, and spent the evening at a music hall.
Look at this, you've got more breakdown in communication. He sends a telegram which is never received. H.G. Wells is making fun of the fact that the late Victorians thought they were on top of things with communication, but actually it was very, very weak, very vulnerable. Bit like if Wi-Fi went down today, where would we be, eh? Where would we be? And then look, he spends the evening at a music hall having a good old time. So he's showing that ignorance, that arrogance and self-belief of the British Empire. Everything is fine. Off we go to the theatre. But of course, we as the reader, we know better. It's dramatic irony. We know that they're not safe. Far from it. They're creeping nearer and nearer, striding, some would say, to get nearer to London, which makes it even more dangerous and even more threatening. Oh, I'm sorry about that little beep in the background. Just teams popping off there. Sorry about that.
In London, also, on Saturday night, there had been a thunderstorm.
Oh, hello. What's this? We've got a thunderstorm. What do we call it then when the weather represents the mood or the danger of something happening in a story? That's right, it's called pathetic fallacy, isn't it? Pathetic fallacy. And what that means is you've got a language technique there that represents the fear and the danger that's coming towards London at this point. I'm not sure why I'm whispering, but I quite like it.
And my brother reached Waterloo in a cab. On the platform, from which the midnight train usually starts, he learned, after some waiting, that an accident prevented trains from reaching Woking that night. The nature of the accident he could not ascertain. Indeed, the railway authorities did not clearly know at the time.
But we've got a good idea, haven't we? We know why the trains have been stopped. We know that near Woking is where the Martians' epicentre, the hub, the headquarters of the Martians are there at Horsell Common, so it's no wonder that the trains have stopped running. We know more than the brother, we know more than the authorities. It puts the reader in a really strong position because it's dramatic irony, and he's hooked the reader, hook, line and sinker. There he is, we've got us, he's got us, and we're engaged into the story at this pivotal point, centrally to the novel, structurally right in the middle of the novel.
There was very little excitement in the station, as the officials, failing to realise that anything further than a breakdown between Byfleet and Woking Junction had occurred, were running the theatre trains, which usually passed through Woking, round by Virginia Water or Guildford. They were busy making the necessary arrangements to alter the route of the Southampton and Portsmouth Sunday League excursions. A nocturnal newspaper reporter, mistaking my brother for the traffic manager, to whom he bears a slight resemblance, waylaid and tried to interview him. Few people, excepting the railway officials, connected the breakdown with the Martians.
Look at this. We've got we mentioned last lesson, last chapter, the parochial nature of the curate, someone who really can't grasp anything much bigger than around his surroundings. And here we've got the people in London worried about what have we got here? They're worried about I lost it again. Oh no, I've lost it. The Southampton and the Portsmouth Sunday League excursions. These are really low-level football games, and it really is unimportant. And yet here they are in London, worrying about these small football games and not looking at the bigger picture. They're not looking at the fact that the Martians are right there, only a few miles away, just in Woking. So more dramatic tension and more dramatic irony.
I have read, in another account of these events, that on Sunday morning, all London was electrified by the news from Woking. As a matter of fact, there was nothing to justify that very extravagant phrase. Plenty of Londoners did not hear of the Martians until the panic of Monday morning. Those who did took some time to realize all that the hastily worded telegrams in the Sunday papers conveyed. The majority of people in London do not read Sunday papers.
Oh, burned. H.G. Wells is having a right go at these Londoners. They don't even read the Sunday papers. They're too arrogant. They're too full of themselves to read about the shenanigans in the little nearby villages and towns like Woking in Surrey. They're on about the big events of London. So it's the arrogance and the ignorance of the wider world that H.G. Wells is poking fun at. It's called satire, and he's poking fun at the Victorians and the way in which they were closed-minded. The English were closed-minded. They weren't thinking about the bigger picture. future. They weren't expecting something to come and knock on their door and invade their country, invade their capital city. You can link it back to the British Empire, the biggest in the world at that time.
The habit of personal security, moreover, is so deeply fixed in the Londoner's mind, and startling intelligence so much a matter of course in the papers, that they could read without any personal tremors. About 7 o'clock last night, the Martians came out of the cylinder, and, moving about under an armour of metallic shields, have completely wrecked Woking Station, with the adjacent houses, and massacred an entire battalion of the Cardigan Regiment. No details are known. Maxim's have been absolutely useless against their armour. The field guns have been disabled by them. Flying Hussars have been galloping into Chertsey. The Martians appear to be moving slowly towards Chertsey or Windsor. Great anxiety prevails in West Surrey, and earthworks are being thrown up to check the advance Londonward. That was how the Sunday Sun put it, and a clever and remarkably prompt handbook article in the Referee compared the affair to a menagerie suddenly let loose in a village.
So just in case we hadn't got that the first time, here we're reminded, that's the word, reminded, of how ignorant and arrogant these Londoners are. They even compare it in the newspapers, a handbook article comparing the affair to a menagerie, a load of animals let loose in a village. Well, I think it's a bit worse than that, don't you? So here you've got the arrogance of the empire, and you've got dramatic irony. So you've got a contextual point of it being of it being a British Empire and the ignorance and arrogance of Londoners at the late Victorian period. But you've also got dramatic irony. The reader knows more, and therefore they're more engaged, and it's more dramatic and more tense.
No one in London knew positively of the nature of the armoured Martians, and there was still a fixed idea that these monsters might be sluggish, crawling, creeping painfully. Such expressions occurred in almost all the early reports. None of the telegrams could have been written by an eyewitness of their advance. The Sunday papers printed separate editions as further news came to hand, some even in default of it. But there was practically nothing more to tell people until late in the afternoon, when the authorities gave the press agencies the news in their possession. It was stated that the people of Walton and Weybridge, and all that district, were pouring along the roads Londonward, and that was all.
So what we've got here then is a real sense of incrementum. The people are travelling Londonward. It doesn't seem like a big problem to the Londoners. It seems like a Surrey problem. It's not their concern. They're ignorant. They're arrogant. We've got the point that the British Empire was too far up its own concerns. That's the word, isn't it? To be worried about anything else in the area. And that's the point here. That even nearby in West Surrey, not a concern. And yet here we are, Londonward. They're travelling, it's a sense of incrementum, getting closer to the capital. There's a sense of progression, a sense of urgency, a sense of alarm for the reader, particularly because we know, more than the Londoners do, that this is a big, big problem. It's a real threat for not only London, but the whole of England and possibly even the world.
My brother went to church at the Foundling Hospital in the morning, still in ignorance of what had happened on the previous night. There, he heard allusions made to the invasion and a special prayer for peace. Coming out, he bought a Referee. He became alarmed at the news in this and went again to Waterloo Station to find out if communication were restored. The omnibuses, carriages, cyclists, and innumerable people walking in their best clothes seemed scarcely affected by the strange intelligence that the news vendors were disseminating. People were interested, or, if alarmed only on account of the local residents. At the station, he heard for the first time that the Windsor and Chertsey lines were now interrupted. The porters told him that several remarkable telegrams had been received in the morning from Byfleet and Chertsey stations, but that these had abruptly ceased. My brother could get very little precise detail out of them. There's fighting going on about Weybridge, was the extent of their information. The train service was now very much disorganized. Quite a number of people who had been expecting friends from places on the southwestern network were standing about the station. One grey-headed old gentleman came and abused the Southwestern Company bitterly to my brother. "It wants showing up," he said.
Well, it does want showing up indeed. He's quite right to say so. It wants showing up. It's bleeding ridiculous. Anyway, so we've got to bear in mind that the rail network here was quite new at this point in history. In the late 1800s, it was only a relatively new advancement in technology, the Industrial Revolution, and yet here, look, the very height of British travel, of British technological advance was actually being disrupted by these Martians. So even the British, thinking they're on the top of their game, actually, it only took this one thing to stop that and destroy what they were so proud of. So it's really poking fun at the British Empire and its confidence in its own ability when clearly something so quickly can destroy and debilitate something as core as a central rail network in and out of London.
One or two trains came in from Richmond, Putney and Kingston, containing people who had gone out for a day's boating and found the locks closed, and a feeling of panic in the air. A man in a blue and white blazer addressed my brother, full of strange tidings.
So here we've got more proper nouns. We've got these places in southwest London. We've got Richmond, we've got Putney, we've got Kingston. These are getting nearer and nearer to the centre of London. These are places now served on the underground network, on the tube network. If you're there today, you can travel to these places on, I would say probably zone 2, maybe zone 3, something like that. But they're very, very close to London now. So this is a real sense of incrementum and danger. Danger.
"There's hosts of people driving into Kingston in traps and carts and things, with boxes of valuables and all that," he said. "They come from Molesey, and Weybridge and Walton, and they say there's been guns heard at Chertsey, heavy firing, and that mounted soldiers told them to get off at once because Martians are coming. We heard guns firing at Hampton Court Station, but we thought it was thunder. What the dickens does it all mean? The Martians can't get out of their pit, can they?" My brother could not tell him.
But we know, don't we? We know they can get out of their pit because we were there and we've experienced the narrative through the narrator. We've been eyewitnesses, so it's dramatic irony. We know more than these Londoners do, and it puts us in a position of power and knowledge, and therefore we're engaged and we're on the edge of our seats. Some of us literally we're falling off our chairs because we know that these things can get out of the pit and they are a real danger, unlike these ignorant, arrogant Londoners who represent the British Empire. But I think I've already said that once or twice, but just in case, write it.
Afterwards he found that the vague feeling of alarm had spread to the clients of the Underground Railway, and that the Sunday excursionists began to return from all over the southwestern lands.
Barnes, Wimbledon, Richmond Park, Kew and so forth. All getting nearer and nearer to London itself, more sense of incrementum. This is all a structural technique, bear in mind. It's a structural technique because it's incrementally getting nearer and nearer to London. Could I get any more excited? I don't think I could, you know.
At unnaturally early hours. But not a soul had anything more than vague hearsay to tell of. Everyone connected with the terminus seemed ill-tempered. About 5 o'clock, the gathering crowd in the station was immensely excited by the opening of the line of communication, which is almost invariably closed, between the southeastern and the southwestern stations, and the passage of carriage trucks bearing huge guns and carriages crammed with soldiers. These were the guns that were brought up from Woolwich and Chatham to cover Kingston. There was an exchange of pleasantries. "You'll get eaten! We're the beast tamers!" and so forth. A little while after that, a squad of police came into the station and began to clear the public off the platforms, and my brother went out into the street again.
Look at the arrogance of these people. You'll get eaten. We're the beast tamers. They think it's just some little carnival show. They don't realise that these Martians could mean the end of civilization, the end of humanity, you see. So it's real arrogance at this point, and the fact that you've got this direct speech, and that's a structural technique. Don't forget it's structure. You've got direct speech from these people with their use of slang language. We're the beast tamers. They're calling the Martians beasts. They're far more than beasts, aren't they? They're not just silly animals. These are sophisticated Martians with technology far greater than our own, even now, but certainly back in 1896 when this was being written.
The church bells were ringing for evensong, and a squad of Salvation Army lasses came singing down Waterloo Road. On the bridge, a number of loafers were watching a curious brown scum that came drifting down the stream in patches.
Oh, lovely, some brown scum. Well, I'll mention it last chapter, but this is the fact that the river leads beautifully from the southwest of London right the way through out to the east in the Essex estuary, and out it goes. And so actually the river takes its journey right through the middle of London, and so anything that comes downstream in London is a precursor. You might say it's foreshadowing what's going to come later, you see. And we know, don't we, the narrator is following the path of the River Thames right the way through London. So everything's heading Londonward, and these little glimpses, these little clues that are drifting down the river first are foreshadowing. That's a structure technique, don't forget, that they're foreshadowing what's going to come a little bit later on. And the brown scum, what could it be? Well, we know what it is, don't we? Because we've got dramatic irony, another structural technique. We know that it's actually dead bits of Martian that got brought down in the river by that first 12-pound gun that went off in its face. Boom, right in its face.
The sun was just setting, and the clock tower and the Houses of Parliament rose against one of the most peaceful skies it is possible to imagine. A sky of gold, barred with long transverse stripes of reddish-purple cloud. There was talk of a floating body. One of the men there, a reservist he said he was, told my brother he had seen the heliograph flickering in the west.
And we know what a heliograph is, don't we? It's a very simple method of communicating, which military have used for generations. Just a reflective mirror, bit of glass, bit of metal maybe, and you can reflect the light of the sun, and you can project a light to somebody else, and they'll then, like a beacon, they'll then be able to send a message on, and it's a way of getting a warning out in a really quick way, literally the speed of light. Which at the time was the only way in which they could communicate over long distances. We know telegrams are pretty ineffective at this time because that requires telegraph poles and lines to still be erect, and of course they're not, they're down. So they're using the heliograph, which is, let's be honest, it's pretty basic, and so that shows just how limited we are as humanity in the face of these Martian creatures. And yet, look, it's heading eastward. There's a heliograph in the west. That's where the action. That's where Horsell Common is. That's where Surrey is. But it's heading east. It's heading through London, always towards London. Incrementum, incrementum, incrementum.
In Wellington Street, my brother met a couple of sturdy roughs who had just rushed out of Fleet Street with still wet newspapers and staring placards. "Dreadful catastrophe!" they bawled to one another down Wellington Street. "Fighting at Weybridge! Full description! Repulse of the Martians! London in danger!" He had to give threepence for a copy of that paper. Then it was, and then only, that he realized something of the full power and terror of these monsters. He learnt that they were not merely a handful of small, sluggish creatures, but that they were minds, swaying vast mechanical bodies, and that they could move swiftly and smite with such power that even the mightiest guns could not stand against them. They were described as vast spider-like machines, nearly 100 feet high, capable of the speed of an express train and able to shoot out a beam of intense heat Masked batteries, chiefly of field guns, had been planted in the country about Horsell Common and especially between the Woking district and London. 5 of the machines had been seen moving towards the Thames, and one, by a happy chance, had been destroyed. In the other cases, the shells had missed, and the batteries had been at once annihilated by the heat rays. Heavy losses of soldiers were mentioned, but the tone of the dispatch was optimistic.
So here we've got a bit more satire. This is really poking fun at the newspaper industry, the editorial journalism, trying to sensationalise the news. London is in danger. Well, of course, London was in danger and is in danger, but he had to pay 3 pence for that newspaper. A lot of money in those days, a lot of money. And it meant that they were trying to capitalise by making more money just because this was exciting news and dramatic news. And even by the end, they're still optimistic. There's a real arrogance, a real naivety. Let's use that word naivety for a change. I'm sick of saying arrogance and ignorance. I can't believe how many times I've said it. If I had a pound for every time I said that, I'd have about 20 quid, wouldn't I? Anyway, let's use the word naivety. So they're very naive and they're optimistic, even though the field guns have been annihilated, in their words. What a verb that is. A strong verb. Not just destroyed, but annihilated. It's a very strong language technique there, but a still sense of optimism. Now, I would link that back to the British Empire once again, showing the naivety and the ignorance of these people who thought they were at the centre of the world, maybe even the centre of the universe.
The Martians had been repulsed. They were not invulnerable. They had retreated to their triangle of cylinders again, in the circle about Woking. Signallers with their heliographs were pushing forward upon them from all sides. Guns were in rapid transit from Windsor, Portsmouth, Aldershot, Woolwich, even from the north, among others, long wire guns of 95 tons from Woolwich. Altogether, 116 were in position or being hastily placed, chiefly covering London. Never before in England had there been such a vast or rapid concentration of military material.
And of course, that's absolutely true. There hadn't been such a gathering of military material. This was H.G. Wells blending fact with fiction. At that point in 1896, or when it was published in 1898, there hadn't been such an assembly, but there could have been. There certainly were they had the wherewithal, they had the weapons there ready, and of course we didn't see that until 1914 when World War I broke out. But this has been described as happening on English soil. Can you imagine that, on English soil? How dare they? The arrogance, the ignorance, let's say it again, that naivety of the British Empire. And yet here it is happening. It's on their literally on their doorstep in good old idyllic Surrey.
Any further cylinders that fell, it was hoped, could be destroyed at once by high explosives, which were being rapidly manufactured and distributed. No doubt, around the report, the situation was of the strangest and gravest description. But the public was exhorted to avoid and discourage panic. No doubt the Martians were strange and terrible in the extreme. But, at the outside, there could not be more than 20 of them against our millions.
Oh dear, the arrogance, the ignorance, the naivety. They think there can only be 20 of them. Why would they be so stupid? Well, of course they are, aren't they? Because they're blind. They're blind to what's happening around them. It's ignorance, it's naivety. It's the British Empire, isn't it? It's that context again, how that they can't believe that anything could be more dangerous than themselves.
The authorities had reason to suppose, from the size of the cylinders, that at the outside there could not be more than 5 in each cylinder, 15 altogether, and one at least was disposed of, perhaps more. The public would be fairly warned of the approach of danger, and elaborate measures were being taken for the protection of the people in the threatened southwestern suburbs. And so, with reiterated assurances of the safety of London and the ability of the authorities to cope with the difficulty, this quasi-proclamation closed.
So this is interesting. This is This is, again, a parody. It's a satire on the politics of London at the time. And look at this, it's describing it as being the elaborate measures were being taken for the protection of the people in the threatened southwestern suburbs. Well, elaborate measures is a euphemism. It's what politicians say. It's what governments say. We've heard it now with the coronavirus, haven't we? COVID-19. Measures are in place. Measures are taking place. It's another word for we're doing something. We don't know what we're doing, but we're doing something. It's a way of making people feel more reassured and more confident. But actually, it doesn't really mean very much. It's a euphemism. That's a language point. euphemism, euphemism, and it means when you're sort of saying one thing but it means something else, or it's sort of, maybe that's not quite a right definition, is it? It's more when it's like a cover up, isn't it? If you say something but it's softer than than the reality. Measures are being taken. It can also be the other way around, where something stronger than the thing being said. But often we say euphemism when we're being a bit rude, don't we? When we sort of, is that a euphemism? Is it? It means a joke or something that's a bit rude. And here the word measures is a euphemism. So that's a language point.
This was printed in enormous type on paper so fresh that it was still wet. And there had been no time to add a word of comment. It was curious, my brother said, to see how ruthlessly the usual contents of the paper had been hacked and taken out to give this place. All down Wellington Street, people could be seen fluttering out the pink sheets and reading, and the Strand was suddenly noisy with the voices of an army of hawkers following these pioneers. Men came scrambling off buses to secure copies. Certainly this news excited people intensely, whatever their previous apathy. The shutters of a map shop in the Strand were being taken down, my brother said, and a man in his Sunday raiment, lemon-yellow gloves even, was visible inside the window, hastily fastening maps of Surrey to the glass. Going on along the Strand to Trafalgar Square, the paper in his hand, my brother saw some of the fugitives from West Surrey. There was a man with his wife and 2 boys and some articles of furniture in a cart such as greengrocers use. He was driving from the direction of Westminster Bridge, and close behind him came a hay wagon with 5 or 6 respectable-looking people in it, and some boxes and bundles. The faces of these people were haggard, and their entire appearance contrasted conspicuously with the Sabbath-best appearance of the people on the omnibuses. People in fashionable clothing peeped at them out of cabs.
I mentioned before the use of character foils, and here we've got foils being used again. These are the refugees. They've come from South West London, from Surrey, and that seems it's popping up again. I can't believe it. Anyway, they're refugees and they're all haggard, and yet the people in London, they're dressed in their very literal Sunday best, you see. So they're being used as character foils because we're being invited to compare these 2 types of people, and some of them are very well dressed and they're not affected by the Martians. Others are clearly have been distraught and are ragged in their appearance. So they're foils, F-O-I-L-S, like aluminium, like Baco foil you have in your kitchen drawer.
They stopped at the square as if undecided which way to take, and finally turned eastward along the Strand. Some way behind these came a man in workday clothes, riding one of those old-fashioned tricycles with a small front wheel. He was dirty and white in the face. My brother turned down towards Victoria and met a number of such people. He had a vague idea that he might see something of me. He noticed an unusual number of police regulating the traffic. Some of the refugees were exchanging news with the people on the omnibuses. One was professing to have seen the Martians. "Boilers on stilts, I'll tell you. Striding along like men." Most of them were excited and animated by their strange experience.
More evidence here of direct speech. Here we have these are the real people in London. They've seen the thing. They're describing it using real direct speech. It puts the reader in the same mind as the eyewitnesses. It lets us imagine what it's like to hear these real perspectives. Makes it more believable, makes it more credible, makes it more scary. And by the way, that's a structural technique.
Beyond Victoria, the public houses were doing a lively trade with these arrivals. At all the street corners, groups of people were reading papers, talking excitedly, and staring at these unusual Sunday visitors. They seemed to increase as night drew on, until at last the roads, my brother said, were like Epsom High Street on a Derby day. My brother addressed several of these fugitives and got unsatisfactory answers from most. None of them could tell him any news of Woking, except one man, who assured him that Woking had been entirely destroyed on the previous night. "I come from Byfleet," he said. "A man on a bicycle came through the place in the early morning and ran from door to door warning us to come away. Then came soldiers. We went out to look, and there were clouds of smoke from the south. Nothing but smoke, and not a soul coming that way. Then we heard the guns at Chertsey, and folks coming from Weybridge. So I've locked up my house and, well, come on."
And quite right too, I say, it's quite right. So we've got more of this direct speech here from real London eyewitnesses. It gives it more credibility, more authenticity, and if we can drop our H's, all the better.
At that time, there was a strong feeling in the streets that the authorities were to blame for their incapacity to dispose of the invaders without all this inconvenience. About 8 o'clock, a noise of heavy firing was distinctly audible over all the south of London.
So here we've got another structural technique, and this is called a discourse marker. A discourse marker. D-I-S-C-O, no. Oh yeah, it is actually D-I-S-C-O-U-R-S-E. Marker. M-A-R-K-E-R. Discourse marker. It's the time at about 8 o'clock. So it's a time reference. There's always progressive movement and motion in this narrative, always pushing forwards, always striving towards London, but always moving forward in time. It's a chronological narrative, and it takes place between the Friday and the Monday morning. All in one weekend, this narrative takes place in a very closed passage of time. And the chronology here in sequential order is a structural technique, and it gives it that sense of authenticity as if it really happened. This is a minute by minute, or at least hour by hour account of what happened. That's discourse marker.
My brother could not hear it for the traffic in the main thoroughfares, but by striking through the quiet back streets to the river, he was able to distinguish it quite plainly. He walked from Westminster to his apartment near Regent's Park about 10. He was now very anxious on my account, and disturbed at the evident magnitude of the trouble. His mind was inclined to run, even as mine had run on Saturday, on military details. He thought of all those silent, expectant guns, of the suddenly nomadic countryside. He tried to imagine boilers on stilts 100 feet high. There were 1 or 2 cartloads of refugees passing along Oxford Street, and several in the Marylebone Road. But so slowly was the news spreading that Regent Street and Portland Place were full of their usual Sunday night promenaders, albeit they talked in groups, and along the edge of Regent's Park there were as many silent couples walking out together under the scattered gas lamps as ever there had been. The night was warm and still, and a little oppressive. The sound of guns continued intermittently, and after midnight there seemed to be sheet lightning in the south.
So it's happening again, that pathetic fallacy, the sheet lightning in the south. It could be real sheet lightning, it could be pathetic fallacy, it could be flares, it could be explosions in the south. We don't quite know, but it certainly adds dramatic tension, and this is the point when London starts to hear it for the very first time. From down near Westminster on the river, he can hear the guns firing, and he feels more and more afraid for his brother's safety. So it's incrementum again, structure, getting closer and closer to the capital, making it more and more urgent and terrifying.
He read and reread the paper, fearing the worst had happened to me. He was restless, and after supper prowled out again aimlessly. He returned and tried in vain to divert his attention to his examination notes. He went to bed a little after midnight, and was awakened from lurid dreams in the small hours of Monday by the sound of door knockers, feet running in the street, distant drumming, and the clamour of bells. Red reflections danced on the ceiling. For a moment he lay, astonished, wondering whether day had come or the world had gone mad. Then he jumped out of bed and ran to the window. His room was an attic, and as he thrust his head out, up and down the street, there were a dozen echoes to the noise of his window sash, and heads in every kind of night disarray appeared. Inquiries were being shouted. "They're coming!" bawled a policeman, hammering at the door. "The Martians are coming!" and hurried to the next door.
They're coming! They're coming! The Martians are coming! This is the real direct speech now of a policeman, a police officer, a figure of authority. And here the direct speech makes it all the more realistic, all the more terrifying. The Martians are here, they're in their capital. It's very, very frightening. And the direct speech, that's a structural technique, adds to that authenticity and that real sense of fear for the brother, but also for the reader as well, because we know more than the brother knows. We know how dangerous these things are. We've seen it firsthand through the perspective of the narrator.
The sound of drumming and trumpeting came from the Albany Street barracks, and every church within earshot was hard at work killing sleep with a vehement, disorderly tocsin. There was a noise of doors opening, and window after window in the houses opposite flashed from darkness into yellow illumination.
Just one quick point here. I don't think this passage will come up in the exam. I don't think it will, but if it does, I won't forgive myself if I don't say this. Look at this. The church bells. I've lost the. Here we are. Every church within earshot was hard at work, killing sleep with a vehement, disorderly tocsin. Means a ringing of bells, a call to service, a call to prayer, and it's being used there to warn people and create alarm and get people out of their beds because it's a time of great emergency. So it's using the church bells as a warning siren. Now there's an irony there, of course, because this is religion being used to kind of a call to action, a call to act against these Martians. We've seen the impotence of the curate, the inactivity, the passivity of the curate in the last chapter, and here we have the religion being used again, this time being practical, being active, and calling people out of their beds to run to safety or evacuate London. And that's well, I suppose it's not really a structural or a language point, really. It's more of a thematic point, really. I would say it was thematic because it's a theme of religion versus science. Religion, it's a bit of context as well, I would say, but certainly a theme of religion running through the narrative. Hope that makes sense.
Up the street came galloping a closed carriage, bursting abruptly into noise at the corner, rising to a clattering climax under the window, and dying away slowly in the distance. Close on the rear of this came a couple of cabs, the forerunners of a long procession of flying vehicles, going for the most part to Chalk Farm Station, where the Northwestern special trains were loading up instead of coming down the gradient into Euston.
So a little bit of geography for you now. This is North London here. This is Chalk Farm Station. It's right at the top, just near Camden Town, and it's right at the top of the Northern Line heading out of London. So this is Euston Station, just next door to King's Cross. You've been to King's Cross, won't you? Of course you have. The most northerly train station in London, and Chalk Farm just a few hundred yards north of that. So this is before... the Chalk Farm was one of the main overground stations. It's now just an underground station. It used to be a real hub of railway network north of London to access the rest of the country north of London. And if you go to Camden Town today, you'll see what's called the Roundhouse. The Roundhouse, and it literally is what's left of the railway. It's a turntable. It's now a live music venue. Just a fun fact for you, that's all. And it's still the carriage shed that they used to have the trains in just near Chalk Farm Station, because it was such a huge and important network point north of London. So this is the exodus. This is people leaving London. They're getting out of there. They want to get north and get as far away from these Martians as possible. This is where panic has started. This has just got real for Londoners at this point in the novel. It's hysteria, it's chaos, it's tension. But as we can see, that the Northwestern special trains are loading up. Instead of coming down the gradient into Euston, instead of coming south down the hill into London, they're going up the hill, getting out of there. In fact, just another fun fact, at that point, he mentions the gradient. We don't notice it these days because we have very advanced trains. But in those days, they had to pull the trains up out of London because it's quite a steep hill. And they had to pull them up on a chain. And that's what the big mechanical works at Chalk Farm, where they would pull the trains from Euston right up the hill to get to Chalk Farm and beyond, up past Alexander Palace, and then they'd be off on their way northward.
For a long time, my brother stared out of the window in blank astonishment, watching the policemen hammering at door after door and delivering their incomprehensible message. Then the door behind him opened, and the man who lodged across the landing came in, dressed only in shirt, trousers and slippers, his braces loose about his waist, his hair disordered from his pillow.
So a little structural point for you there. It mentions hammering at door after door. We've got the verb, well, in fact, let's start with language. You've got the verb hammering. Not really hammering, not with an actual hammer, surely. Good grief, God blimey, governor. It's more like a metaphor, isn't it? Hammering. So it's a metaphor, but it suggests violence. It suggests, what does it suggest? I can't think. It suggests like urgency. That's the one. And so he's hammering on the door to suggest the urgency, and he's doing it from door to door. So he repeats that word door, which the repetition, which is a structural point, remember, it just reinforces how many people this police officer is knocking on the doors of, and he's letting everybody know to evacuate their homes because danger is coming. So a bit of language and structure there for you, you lucky, lucky people.
What the devil is it? He asked. A fire? What a devil of a row! They both craned their heads out of the window, straining to hear what the policeman was shouting. People were coming out of the side streets and standing in groups at the corners talking. What the devil is it all about? Said my brother's fellow lodger. My brother answered him vaguely and began to dress, running with each garment to the window in order to miss nothing of the growing excitement. And presently, men selling unnaturally early newspapers came bawling into the street. London in danger of suffocation! The Kingston and Richmond defence is forced! Fearful massacres in the Thames Valley!
Okay, so I'm going to introduce you to a new word, a new technical term at this point. And lots of this chapter, that's how they say it, don't they? Chapter. Lots of this chapter is told through newspaper headlines, and it references Fleet Street, where the newspapers are printed, even those roughs from a few pages back where they were, the ink was still wet on the paper as they were selling their newspaper headlines for 3p a go. And the technical term for when something is when a narrative is told through letters, or in this case newspaper letters, newspaper headlines and newspaper articles, it's called an epistolary narrative. I'll say it again for you just in case you didn't catch that. It's an epistolary narrative. I'm a little bit close to his microphone, so when I say that it kind of pops on the microphone. Pop. Epistolary. Now I'm going to spell that for you, so get yourselves ready. E-P-I-S-T-O-L-A-R-Y. I think that's right. Can't quite picture it in my mind's eye now. Epistolary. Yeah, that's right. And what it does is it tells a story through a series of letters. And this is technically not letters in the same way that you might see. Well, for example, Year 9 are doing Frankenstein. And if you've read Frankenstein before, last year perhaps, then you know that lots of the narrative is told through actual letters between the Captain Walton and his sister. Now these aren't actual letters, but it is through second-hand writing. It's through a newspaper. So I think you can certainly get away with referring to it as an epistolary narrative. That's a structural choice.
And all about him, in the rooms below, in the houses on each side and across the road, and behind in the park terraces, and in the 100 other streets of that part of Marylebone, and the Westbourne Park district, and St Pancras, and westward, and northward in Kilburn, and St John's Wood, and Hampstead, and eastward in Shoreditch, and Highbury, and Heggerston, and Hoxton, and indeed through all the vastness of London, from Ealing to East Ham.
Look at that. How many places does he reference? Could he mention any more places? Probably could, but he does plenty there, doesn't he? So we've got so many proper nouns. This is a language technique. Proper nouns. Nouns, that's the one, nouns. No, not nouns. That's what you have with your curry, innit? You ribby marry. Anyway, these are proper nouns referring to all these places: Marylebone, Westbourne Park, St Pancras, Kilburn, St John's Wood, Hampstead, Haggerston, Hoxton, Shoreditch, Ealing, East Ham. All these boroughs of London, you see, they're all being affected. These are places that readers of the time, contemporary readers, but also readers nowadays, readers like you and I, would recognise these places as places that make up the capital city of England, and it's under threat. The place has been evacuated. It's terrifying, it's dramatic tension, and it's been done through a language technique which is simply using place names, proper nouns, and that has authenticity. In fact, if you've got a map of London, I would encourage you to have a look at the map. In fact, as you read the novel, it's a very good idea to chart the journey of the narrator through the book, actually looking at the map as you do, and you'll see exactly down to the street which parts of London he walks through, and it's very, very useful to see the geography of this journey as he travels through from southwest right through to North London in Primrose Hill by the end of the novel.
People were rubbing their eyes and opening windows to stare out and ask aimless questions, and dressing hastily as the first breath of the coming storm of fear blew through the streets. It was the dawn of the Great Panic. London, which had gone to bed on Sunday night oblivious and inert, was awakened in the small hours of Monday morning to a vivid sense of danger.
Well, you know why I've stopped it there, don't you? Eh? Why have I stopped it there? Well, because London has been personified here, isn't it? London, which had gone to bed on Sunday night oblivious and inert, was awakened in the small hours of Monday morning to a vivid sense of danger. So we've got personification of London there. Now that's a language technique. It's what I've been banging on about. It's about London being the centre of everything. It's the centre of the British Empire. And here it is under attack. So it's a very crucial point. It's very dramatic. And that is a language technique of personification. Now, if you wanted to go a little bit more advanced, I would suggest that you actually refer to it as a synecdoche, because that's also a language technique where something represents something much bigger. And actually London is, yes, it's just a city, but it represents the British Empire. It represents the whole thing. So I think I'd be tempted to say that it was a synecdoche. SYNECDOCHE, and that's how we spell synecdoche. Oh, I think I'm going mad sitting here in my little office room talking to the walls. I hope someone's listening to this. I hope it makes sense. Otherwise it's all for nothing. Let's get back to the story.
Unable from his window to learn what was happening, my brother went down and out into the street, just as the sky between the parapets of the houses grew pink with the early dawn.
Now, we've seen this before with the start of a new day, a nice pink dawn. It should be positive, but here it's absolutely not positive. It's been used for contrast. So you've got the pink of the nice new day, the bright new natural beginning of a new day, a Monday morning even, the first day of the working week. And yet we've got London is in more or less evacuation mode, it's in crisis mode, and here we have it, even this new terror, this black smoke, which I'll mention just ahead of myself to stop myself having to pause the recording again, and it's the black smoke, it's the toxic gas that the Martians have created. Now this is H.G. Wells being very prophetic, not pathetic, but prophetic, and what that means is he's predicted something from the future. He's predicted toxic gas, which the Martians have got here with this black smoke, you see. So there's a few things happening there. You've got the sort of symbolism and theme. It's not really language or structure, I'm afraid. So sorry if you're colour coding, but it is a thematic or a symbolic event where the dawn should represent. I suppose if you twisted my arm, I'd have to say it was language because it's using the word dawn. But I'm scraping the barrel really, and so a language point, I guess, if you wanted to pin it down. But the dawn should represent positivity and optimism and a new day, a new week. But actually, this is very, very dangerous for the Londoners at the time.
The flying people on foot and in vehicles grew more numerous every moment. "Black smoke!" he heard people crying. And again, "Black smoke!" The contagion of such a unanimous fear was inevitable. As my brother hesitated on the doorstep, he saw another news vendor approaching him and got a paper forthwith. The man was running away with the rest and selling his papers for $1 each as he ran. A grotesque mingling of profit and panic. And from this paper my brother read the catastrophic dispatch of the Commander-in-Chief. "The Martians are able to discharge enormous clouds of a black and poisonous vapor by means of rockets. They have smothered our batteries, destroyed Richmond, Kingston, and Wimbledon, and are advancing slowly towards London, destroying everything on the way. It is impossible to stop them. There is no safety from the black smoke, but in instant flight." That was all, but it was enough. The whole population of the great 6 million city was stirring, slipping, running. Presently, it would be pouring en masse northward.
Just look at that. We've got a language and a structural point working in perfect harmony here. We've got, it mentions these active verbs. The 6 million city was stirring, slipping, running. So we've got these active verbs. There's our language point, those 3 active verbs. And then there's 2 structural points I'd like to make. One is it's a triadic structure. There are 3 of them. Stirring, slipping, running, that's 3. And then also, you've got a syndetic list, haven't you? Stirring, slipping and running. So 2 structural points, 1 language point. Rewind, have a listen again if you missed it. And that's working together to create this real sense of panic and hysteria. I know how they feel.
"Black smoke!" the voices cried. "Fire!" The bells of the neighbouring church made a jangling tumult. A cart, carelessly driven, smashed amid shrieks and curses against the water trough up the street. Sickly yellow light went to and fro in the houses, and some of the passing cabs flaunted unextinguished lamps. And overhead, the dawn was growing brighter, clear and steady and calm.
Just that point again there to reinforce the symbolism of the dawn, the new day, just in case we missed it before. And here it is, ironic, because of course this is, yes, it's a new day, but it's bringing with it not hope, not optimism, but sheer terror and destruction. It feels like London is done for, and it seems, and look at this, if you just hold the book closed, it's more or less, let me in fact have a little try here, let me just, hang on a second. Yeah, if I hold the book closed with a finger in the middle, it's just about exactly halfway through the book, you see, and so it's right on the pivotal point. Think of a seesaw, right on the pivot point in the middle. It could go either way.
He heard footsteps running to and fro in the rooms and up and down stairs behind him. His landlady came to the door, loosely wrapped in dressing gown and shawl. Her husband followed, ejaculating.
Whoa, hang on there for just 1 second. This is an old-fashioned word. We tend not to use it in this context much anymore, and for very good reason. What it means is an outburst, a sudden, unpredicted outburst. And it usually refers to speech. So the husband is sort of gibbering and jabbering and making these noises, these outbursts, and that's what it means. So lots of Victorian novels, I'm sure you'll have read plenty of them, and they're full of these. You find it a lot in Sherlock Holmes books when Dr. Watson suddenly ejaculates, and it means he's suddenly an outburst of something that he says in a sort of hurried and chaotic manner. So that's what that means, just in case any uncertainty, and I know what you're thinking.
As my brother began to realize the import of all these things, he turned hastily to his own room, put all his available money, some £10 altogether, into his pocket and went out again into the streets.
And there we have it, the end of chapter 14 in London, and an interesting chapter, pivotal right on the middle point of the book, as these next few chapters are. We can count them all as the middle section of the novel. If it comes up in the exam, we'll refer to it as the central section, and if it's central, it's therefore pivotal. And think about that seesaw. The novel rests on its centre point. It could be a turning point, and it does seem that way. It seems like London is under attack, it's under threat, and things seem pretty dire for the Londoners at this point. And by seeing it through the brother, who is more or less the same as the narrator, he's another sort of medical academic type, he's a foil for the brother, because, well, we're going to see that in the next few chapters what actually happens with the brother, but he's another perspective, another voice. He allows us to see two places at once. We've been in Woking, we've seen the horror at Horsell Common, and we can now see what's happening in the capital. How does H.G. Wells do it, I wonder? Well, he does it with two characters, doesn't he? Two narrators. He has the narrator, unnamed, and he has his brother, also unnamed, and that's how he does it. So it's a structural technique, but it's very useful to allow the reader two glimpses, two perspectives of the same thing. I hope this has been useful. I hope the voice hasn't been too distracting, but next time, well, I think it keeps me sane, really, if you can call it sane. And the next chapter, I think, what's the next chapter called? Is it what had happened in Surrey? I'm going to ask my good friend Greg from Glasgow to talk through the next chapter for me. So look out for his. Hopefully you understand his voice a bit better than mine. Okay, take care of yourselves and see you next time for chapter 15. Bye.